I mean, is it a cinematic masterpiece? Absolutely not.
No.
Is it entertaining? Yeah. So I think it's worth a watch.
Hi, everyone. Welcome back to episode 2 of the Booked on Fantasy podcast. We are two best friends who love all things fantasy. And on this podcast, we will explore the world of fantasy through books, shows, and movies, but with a heavy emphasis on books.
It's not lost on me that our first real episode, it's about a movie, but that's okay. It's a good one. And we will also be releasing our third of last episode today as well. For this episode, though, spoilers, we will be talking about the movie Damsel in its entirety. So if you have not watched it or you have not finished it and you don't want any spoilers, please pause this, go watch it, and then come back because we would love to hear your thoughts on the movie. But we don't want to spoil anything for anyone. Also, please keep in mind this is an R-rated podcast. We are adults. We will have explicit conversations and use explicit language. So just be mindful of that if you're at work or if you have kids around. Maybe put on some headphones. With that being said, today we'll be talking about the movie Damsel starring Millie Bobby Brown. It is a Netflix original that was released on March 8th.
Oh, great movie. Pretty good. Pretty good in my opinion.
Pretty good, yeah.
So, give a quick little roadmap of today's episode. We're going to start with a quick summary. So, we'll tell you just generally what the movie is about. Then, we're going to go into characters and talk about who are all the main players. Next, we'll go into any event, particularly anything that like stood out to us. But we're hoping we're going to be able to deep dive into those and like really dish out our thoughts on
Of which I many. I have many.
Yes, I do as well. But just wait, those are coming. After that, we thought it'd be fun for us to share some of our favorite moments and then maybe also some dislikes. And then lastly, we're going to end it with a fun little rating slash recommend. So we'll tell you what we thought about it, but then we're also going to share what the actual ratings,
the real
movies were.
Yeah. People who are not blinded by their love for dragons. So before we give you a summary, I just want to say from my own personal experience, when I watched this movie, I was out of town, so it's not my normal television. And when I got home, I watched it again, and my TV has 4K capabilities. And the viewing experience was completely different. So if you can watch it in 4K because it like genuinely enhances the experience, and I am not like a techie person, like I don't care about that kind of stuff. Like I had the same TV for 10 years and my husband made me buy a new one. I just don't care. But it actually made a big enough difference that I felt the need to tell you. So just something I just wanted to put out there.
You want it bougie, watch it in 4K.
Yeah, exactly.
All right, so diving into the characters really quick. First off, we have Elodie. She is the main character and the heroine, and she's also the oldest sister who is betrothed to Prince Henry. We also have Floria, who is Elodie's younger sister. Then we also have Lord Bayford, who is Elodie's father. I was not his biggest fan. Obviously, Toy Story for him too. Next, we have Lady Bayford, who is the stepmother. The reason they refer to as stepmother, very proper of them throughout most of the movie. But next, we have Queen Isabel. So she is the current queen of the Kingdom of Auria. We don't like her. At least I don't.
We don't.
I don't think you like her either, but
I don't think anybody does.
I hope nobody likes her. And then we have the Prince of Auria. So that's Prince Henry. Also not great. Ooh, not a fan. And last but not least, we have the dragon. She doesn't have a name, but they just refer to her as the dragon. And then I guess notable, they also have a couple past princesses that they mentioned. None of them are mentioned by name except for one, and her name happens to be Victoria. But
she is notable though.
All right, moving along. Next, we are going to do like a more detailed breakdown of all the events. So think beginning, middle, end, kindergarten style.
Our movie opens up with a scene from the past. You see a king and his knights, and they're racing across this field towards this mountain. You see the dragon in the background, and you hear the king yell, "Kill the beast." So my first thought is immediately like most dragon movies, book shows is, oh, this dragon is evil, it's terrorizing the village, like it's obviously taking the kids and the livestock, burning things down. Like it makes me think of Smaug from The Hobbit. I'm like, okay, it's that kind of dragon, right? Yeah, so I'm like, okay, they're gonna go kill the dragon. So they enter the cave. The dragon just immediately starts roasting people, just flames everywhere. Only the king's left. You see him put down the sword and bow to the dragon, and then boom, cuts to present day. So one of the things that I thought was interesting about this scene, it's just like a quick little side note, is that the dragon's fire looked more like lava-esque to me instead of just actual flame. I just thought that was a cool effect and like a neat spin on traditional dragon fire.
Moving on. So next we meet Elodie and her little sister Floria, and they're chopping some wood. They're also having the conversation just about the state of their kingdom and stuff and how it's starting to get cold and they're running out of resources and everything. And so through that, we basically learn a couple things. The first one is that the kingdom is not in great shape and doesn't seem like they're going to make it for too much longer. And then the second thing we learn is that Elodie is a very genuinely good person. Like she definitely takes on that older sister responsible role for sure. She's already very much thinking about what's best for the kingdom and is not really thinking very selfishly or anything, considering she is probably pretty young.
She is literally out there chopping wood for people in the village. I mean, not a lot of, I don't think she's a princess yet, but like a lot of like ladies would be out there doing that.
Yeah, I think one of the notable things that she had said was they were talking about what they can use to help keep people warm. And she mentions that they're going to have to literally take their tapestries down now because they like, don't have enough things like that to keep everybody warm. And that contrasted with the fact that her sister was like, what? The drapes? Sister, we're going to take them. And she's, yeah, like we don't have a choice. We have to. So I think that was pretty telling as far as a character feature for her goes. So then they leave and they walk into the castle. And there's a lot of other stuff that just shows the condition of the village or kingdom. They're handing out soup and stuff like that to everyone. There's not really much left to go around. So that just helps paint the picture of how desperately they needed something to change at least. So then next they arrive. Elodie and her sister are in the castle and they walk into a room and her father and then their stepmother are talking to a mysterious woman. She's dressed in a weird, I don't know what their costumes also, by the way, were really weird.
Yeah, I literally wrote like high priestess. Like it just gives high priestess vibes. It made me think in Game of Thrones.
Yes.
I mean, ladies who shame Cersei Lannister.
So she is in this red fit with a crazy cone hat thing. She gives her and Lord Bayford, Elodie's dad, are in a conversation. And she had given him a letter. And when they open up that letter, it turns out to be a marriage proposal from the Kingdom of Oria, signed by the Queen Isabel. And the Queen has a proposal for them to meet and marry her son, Prince Henry. So all of this is obviously like a clear sign. Like you got alarm bells going off because you're like, why would you need to? It just seems odd because this is a very like wealthy kingdom. And like they're
why wouldn't they be going for a princess?
Normally, like obviously kingdoms marry for alliance and strength. And so it's odd that one would marry somebody like a kingdom that is clearly not doing well and doesn't really have anything to offer.
That's such a good observation. That did not even occur to me. Like it seems so obvious when you say it. So that's a really good thought because I'm just like, oh, how nice that she is to marry a prince. I'm just excited for her.
No, not today. So Elodie, her dad definitely wants this to happen because in his mind being like, oh, this will be great for the kingdom. But Elodie is pretty unsure. So she says that money is not a reason to marry, which also speaks to her character, I think, which is great, at least from like a modern perspective. But she does eventually agree to do it because she realizes that they don't have a choice. She realizes that it's going to help save her kingdom. So she's not marrying for love. She's married for need and riches because everyone's going to die.
No, I think Lord Bayford literally says we won't make it through the winter.
Yeah.
So it's we all die or you marry this rich prince. Doesn't really give her much of a choice. So in the next scene, that Elodie and her family are on a ship to Oria. They arrive and immediately red flags. I'm on high alert. It's all nice and sunny, and then out of nowhere, it gets spooky and misty. And like in the entrance to the Bay Area are these two ginormous statues of dragons. They're very ominous looking, and hello, obvious foreshadowing. But to me, if I'm Elodie, I'm like, that's weird. Like maybe it's like historical ancestral thing. Maybe not. We don't know. I guess we'll find out.
Yeah.
They get in a carriage and Oria is just beautiful. In the castle, basically everything is made of gold. Elodie's is shown to her room and it's very ornate with like lots of gold inlay. And it's just like it just screams money, right? Which we know is why Elodie is there because it's a very rich family. My favorite part of the scene is Floria's constant comments. Like I love this castle. Like this room is fabulous. Like she is all about the money. Like low-key think she wants to marry the prince because it's so bougie. So Floria is
that was funny.
Character note, Floria is bougie. So then we fast forward and later in the evening, Elodie goes out onto her balcony and she's just admiring the landscape, looking around. And the way the castle's designed, there's like another turret so she can see another balcony and she sees this other young girl come out. We don't know who this girl is. We have not seen her before. She's a mystery. And like they've exchanged this kind of like small smile. And then the mystery girl is called off and there's like Elodie has this puzzled look on her face. So I'm like, who is that girl? Why did we focus on her? Why is she important? So I need to remember this for later, this girl, because she will reappear. Shortly after that, Elodie's in her bed and she's drawing a maze, like the kinds that are on the back of menus at restaurants, like kids' menus. And this is really important foreshadowing, and it comes up again in a few scenes, which we'll talk about. But we know that once Elodie is trapped in the cage, that's like a maze for her to get out. There's some maps she has to navigate her way through. And I think this is just a really nice choice of the director to add this in to show Elodie's skill set in navigating mazes and difficult situations, which we know that she will be thrown into, quite literally thrown into.
She will be in the maze.
Yes. So she's drawing her maze. It's in the evening. So she goes back into her balcony just to take one last look before bedtime. And we see the balcony where the mystery girl was, and it's all dark and it's empty. And again, the puzzle looked like, where is that girl? Where did she go? And then we see in a very distant mountain a cluster of flames. Why are there people on the mountain in the middle of the night?
Yeah, that flame part, I was like, ooh, that I didn't know it at the time, but I just knew it was going to be important. But yeah, I thought that her statement about being truthful is interesting because that's going to come up later. Like in terms of
I didn't even think about that.
Yeah, because like she's like, I will always tell the truth. I'm going to like let that know. And obviously that becomes like a very large thing later on, the dragon, because she could have just yeeted the dragon at the end, but she decided that no, the way to get everybody out of this is to let her know because she recognizes that, oh, the dragon just didn't know the truth about what was going on. And so that was a nice little foreshadowing moment. It was also really funny that Floria was intrigued with the castle. Like Floria was like locked in on the fact that, oh, we're gonna be rich now. She's like looking around like everything we wow, it's so beautiful. And so she's infatuated with the wealth, and Elodie's like, something's off here. So yeah, I think that character contrast was interesting between the two of them, and it was pretty funny. But I would probably be doing Floria's doing, so can I blame her? No, but
no, I think we all would be like jaw hit the floor. Yeah, wow, how could you not, right?
Yeah. Then we cut to a scene. So now Prince Henry and Elodie they're like getting to know each other a little bit more. They're walking through the garden, and this scene was pretty important because it shows her character again. Even with her husband, or future husband, we should say, she is very quick-witted and a little bit insulting in some ways.
Yeah. She's definitely not showing reverence to him because he's a prince. She's definitely like very still herself, like, you don't intimidate me because you're rich and you're a prince. I like that
Right.
about her.
Yeah, I think she was also just trying to get to know him more because obviously they don't know anything about each other and yet they're supposed to be married to each other.
Yeah.
I think going back to her earlier point too about how she doesn't want to marry for like riches, right? Like she wants to marry for love. And so I think this was part of her attempt to, despite the situation, still get to know the prince and try to form a little bit more of a connection.
Yeah.
So yeah, that was a an important thing. But they also again showed a maze that she drew. So I thought that was just another highlight of this maze is gonna come back and mean something later on. So that was important to know. Then they sneak away from the guards and they end up riding their horses through the countryside. The prince's end, I think he starts to view her as more of, maybe this is shitty to say, but like as more of like a person, really, because obviously we realize
Yes.
that he's just been getting married to these people, doesn't get to know them, doesn't know anything about them. But I think in this part, you can see in the facial expressions that he's, oh, she's not like what I thought, kind of, to some extent.
Yeah.
Or that's what I noticed.
In his defense, if I was in his position and I knew I was just gonna have to toss these girls into a cave, I would probably not want to get to know them as humans.
Yeah, that's true. Because that would just, it would just hurt to get to know somebody and then
Yeah.
they're just, bye.
I'm not defending him. I'm just
Yeah.
saying
No, he was very
if it
much,
were me.
he was very much complacent in all of that.
Oh yeah,
He
absolutely.
could have did something way on, but he didn't. So shame, shame. Later on, this is kind of like an ominous moment because her father comes out of a meeting with the queen, and you can tell that he's like visibly very distraught about something. And their stepmother is like trying to ask him and be like, what's going on? Like, what happened? But he pretty much refuses to say anything about it. And that's like the main major, or like the first major clue that something very fishy is happening, right? Because the father's sketched out, like, why would you'd expect everyone to be like happy, yay, like everything's great if things were, but they're not. So that was a pretty telling moment. It cuts to a portion of where it's just the queen, so Queen Isabel and stepmother, Lady Bayford, having a conversation. And in this conversation, the stepmother is attempting to, she's kissing up, but she's also attempting to get to know the queen because obviously from their perspective they don't know anything about anyone. And I think for her own comfort and maybe just like peace of mind, I think she's trying to get like a feel for the queen.
I disagree, honestly. I have very mixed feelings about Lady Bayford, the stepmother. I feel like her initial intent is to totally kiss ass. She's, oh, you have excellent taste, Your Majesty. Oh, everything is just wonderful and divine. Because I feel like in the beginning of the movie, her character is very pushy. Like in the scene you talked about earlier, where Lord Bayford comes out from the meeting with the Queen, she's like, did you get a good bride price? You didn't do anything to embarrass us, did you? You know, like
Oh yeah.
she's very pushy about the whole thing. We see like an evolution of her character in just a few scenes actually, but I feel like in that moment, like she's just trying to kiss ass and make sure that everything goes through so she can cash a big fat check. Honestly, that's how it
Yeah,
read
yeah,
to
no,
me.
you're right. I had forgotten about her interaction earlier. But yeah, obviously then after the queen snubbed her, then she was like,
Oh,
oh, like,
vicious.
yeah, I was like,
Yeah, she's so condescending. It really shows her air of superiority because she says like, "Oh, your father was a rope maker," and the stepmother's like, "Oh, the best in the city." She's like, "And look how far you've come." But it's so insulting. It's so condescending, and I think it speaks to her character in that she feels entitled And that's why she feels okay with murdering young women to sacrifice for her family and her kingdom, because she has obviously lived a life of great privilege, and definitely a big L for the queen. Does not do anything to make us like her, like in the slightest. If there was any shot for redemption,
Yeah.
gone.
Then obviously through that interaction and realizing that, oh, like this queen straight up told her, no, we just need a bride. That's it. There's no other reason for why we need this marriage to happen other than we just need her.
Mm-hmm.
That's very suspicious. So that cues the
Yes.
stepmother onto like, oh, you know, something's definitely off. In that moment, the stepmother really realizes that something's amiss.
So the next morning, we see Elodie and Floria. They're together, and Elodie is getting dressed for her wedding. I thought it was interesting. So back in the day, these dresses had a million layers. So it's like a very ornate process to get dressed. But they put like this like metal looking dagger into her bodice, which I'm like, is that intentional? Is that just like a traditional symbolic thing? But it does come in handy later, which we will talk about. So we also see Floria playing with this like sort of like egg-like, like, I don't know, charm pendant on a chain, and there's something inside of it, and she smells it. And immediately I'm like, what is that? Like, why is she smelling it? I don't know. So that will come up later. But I did think it was interesting that it looks like an egg. And as we know, eggs have become super important later in the story. And I thought it was interesting that presumably each bride gets one. So like 3 eggs. So maybe it's supposed to be representative of the 3 eggs that we will discuss later. I don't know. Or maybe it's just some weird traditional thing. I don't know. But I did think that was really interesting. Immediately after that, we jump into the marriage scene. Not a super notable scene. They get married. Hooray.
So casual.
Yeah, right? That was something I didn't think. I'm like, okay, this is literally the future king, and it's just like a backyard wedding.
Yeah.
You know, like not super.
There's like nobody there. Like,
yeah. Yeah. Because usually when a future king gets married, you know, it's like a big production.
Yeah.
But whatever, Elodie rolls with it. She looks happy, and you're like, you have this moment of hope, and you're like, oh, maybe it's all gonna work out. That's so great. They are walking into this carriage, and Elodie say goodbye to all of her family, and especially a sweet moment with her sister. Just another scene that highlights how important her sister is to her, and that will become really important later, as we will learn. Elodie asks the prince, where are we going? And he says, again, he doesn't lie. He's very clever with his words. And he says, we're going to pay homage to his ancestors in the mountains. So Elodie, she's cool. A girl, she rolls with it. She's hopeful. Things are going to work out. So they pull up to the mountain. They get out of the carriage. And I noticed, which I thought was like a really weird touch, the entire path leading up is like layered with rose petals. So obviously someone had to do that. And I just think that's so ridiculous that someone took the time to gather rose petals and lay them out just so they could throw her into a hole to feed to a dragon. So rude. Elodie's all happy, whatever. She's making eyes at Henry. Then boom, you turn the corner and there's all these people wearing really creepy gold masks that just gave me the ick. Honestly, like as soon as I saw that, I'm like, this is like some cult serial killer. Like, what is this? And Elodie, you can see her face, and me is like, what the fuck? Yeah, it's weird.
That was super odd. I also just don't understand the significance of that. Is it just because it was like a ritual, so they had to play the part to some extent?
I thought about it, and I really couldn't think of any like symbolic or any reason why that would be necessary. It feels like they just threw it in for an extra element of
just like theatrical effect.
Theatrical, yeah. I don't know. It was weird.
About the screaming, did you feel like her cries were weird?
A little bit, yeah. A little bit.
They were like, I don't know how to describe them. They were a little weird.
Okay, but I don't know, but like, when was the last time you tried to scream? Because it's actually really hard.
That's true.
Like, I listen to I have, 2 small children, and I listen to them scream, and it's so piercing. And every once in a while, I'm like, when I'm alone in the car, I'm like, can I still scream? And it's really hard on my vocal cords.
This is true.
You should try it. Anyone listening, the next time you're alone, just like try and scream and see how it comes out. Because it is not the same scream of our childhood.
But now we're like in the middle. We're entering the middle of the storyline. And I feel like this is like where everything really picks up, right? Like you get to the bulk
Yes.
of the anxiety and the actions. The queen starts retelling and talking about how you have joined a long line of women who helped to build up this kingdom, which we really know is just code for being sacrificed to the dragon.
Yeah.
But she tells the backstory about the king who had to strike up this deal with the dragon, this vicious dragon who is terrorizing the land, and how he had to sacrifice his 3 daughters in order to get peace. So after that spiel, this was really important. She slices both of their palms and joins their hands to make them like mix their blood.
Ew.
Yeah, disgusting. I would not do that. And also, I don't want my hand being sliced. I get like the creeps thinking about being cut.
I feel like that's such a common trope in fantasy. They have to like slice their hand and like do a few drops of blood.
Yeah,
Like,
it's like a joining thing they use all the time.
It's a weird thing.
We obviously know that this is going to be pretty important later because now Elodie is quote unquote royal through this, like official.
Quote unquote. Big air quotes of royal
Big
blood.
air quotes royal. And obviously we're sitting there being like, well, what's the purpose of that? Is it just like a ritualistic thing or is there deeper meaning? After all that, then they're like, yay, you're joined. And they are going to make their way back over. And Prince Henry says he's supposed to carry her. Elodie, being the strong woman that she is no, it's fine. I can walk. But then he's, no, I insist. But so she agrees and he picks her up and carries her. And, you know, he's like, just relax. Like, you can close your eyes, which we're all sitting there being like, don't do it. Don't do it. Get out and run.
I'm dying. I was dying during this part, Lorraine. Like, as soon as he picked her up and she just like closes her eyes. Honestly, I actually laughed like during the movie, which I know it's not really a funny part, but it was just so funny to me.
So we think everything's fine and dandy until he like tosses her over. It's just like, no. And then she falls. I don't even know how far she falls, but I'm pretty sure it's like 200 feet or something crazy. And the craziest thing is that she wakes up like completely unharmed, other than like maybe she has a concussion. I don't know, but she doesn't break a bone. She has no sprained ankles. And I was like, all right, witchcraft.
I know. My thought was like, how do they not all die just from the fall? I feel like this is just one of those like movie things. You just need to ignore it so you can enjoy the plot.
Yeah.
It just adds to the drama. We see Elodie. She comes to in this cavern. I would like to point out in this scene, this is a common theme throughout the rest of the podcast in reference to the dragon. When Elodie starts screaming, they flash to the dragon and you see the dragon like open its eye, like it's awake. And I feel like that is indicative to me that this dragon doesn't follow normal canon for dragons and is sort of underpowered. Like most dragons have incredibly keen sense of smell and sight, and they're ultimate predators. They're very aware of their surroundings. And it seems kind of odd to me that like the dragon doesn't really awake until she hears Elodie screaming. And there are a lot of like points throughout the rest of the movie where I'm kind of like, how does the dragon not know that she's there? How does it not hear her, see her, smell her, etc.? Next, we meet the dragon. First and foremost, I was very pleasantly surprised to hear the dragon's voice and see that it was a female dragon. Lorraine, were you surprised that the dragon was female?
To be honest, I don't know. I guess I was. I didn't even really honestly think of it.
Yeah, I don't know why it took me by surprise because obviously in a lot of fantasy series and stuff, there's male and female dragons. But for whatever reason, I was just like assumed that it would be a male dragon. So anyway, Elodie asked the dragon, what do you want? And I love this scene because I feel like it shows her fierceness. If that were me, honestly, I probably wouldn't pee my pants in fear. I would have run away and been burned immediately. Or I would just would have started crying, begging for my life, pleading with the dragon. And I like that Ellie's just like, what do you want? Like she's defiant. She's not gonna cower, even though she's literally facing a fucking dragon.
Yeah.
So I just really like that little moment, that little moment of defiance for her. And so this is really important and will be an important theme for the rest of the movie. But the dragon says, I want what is promised, what is owed. Every generation, your kind must pay. The scent of royalty betrays you. Which, red flag, remember earlier Lorraine talks about when the evil queen cuts their hands and mixes their blood in a sort of weird, marriage ceremony. This is important, and we will continue to highlight its importance throughout the rest of the podcast. So just keep that kind of in the back of your mind. So Elodie now runs for her life down a tunnel. Surprise, she trips over a dead girl, which was the mystery girl. Exactly, oh shit, which was the mystery girl from the previous night. So I think this is where Elodie really starts to put the pieces into play, that she's a sacrifice. The other girl that she had seen likely married and sacrificed. And so I think this is when she realizes she is not the first one that's been here. And she has this kind of big realization. So she continues to run for the dragon. She tries to crawl through this hole. And damn it, if her stupid, archaic hoop skirt gets stuck.
Can you imagine running with all that weight? Those are heavy.
That's probably why men made women wear those, because it was harder for them to run away.
They could not escape.
They could not escape.
Literally could not escape.
Yes. If that is what caused my death, because I couldn't get the hoop skirt off, just, oh my God. Anyway, okay, so I digress. I would be I'm just annoyed thinking about it.
Yeah.
Okay, so she's trying to crawl this really small hole, and her hoop skirt gets stuck, and the dragon, she does suffer a severe burn on her leg, which is important, so just remember that for later. And the dragon is taunting her. And so I guess she's far enough in the cave for the dragon can't really get to her. Elodie continues to make her way down this tunnel. She's climbing. It's extremely narrow. All I could think was claustrophobia. It made me anxious to watch this scene. Then she falls down into another cavern. And that weird egg thing we talked about earlier, she lights that and uses that as a light. I don't know what that material is or why she uses it. I don't know. It's weird, but
yeah. It was a little bit odd. She happens to have a few objects that are really helpful to her on her person somehow.
Yeah,
that's convenient.
Yeah, very convenient.
But yeah, there's also so much falling. She's always just falling through things.
And no broken bones. A miracle.
Yeah, just falling and stumbling around. Next scene, she's fallen down to another cave, or farther into the cave, and she's making her way through. And eventually she comes to another chasm. Yeah, another very large crack in the cave that if she falls down, she would die. But across from there is this blue glowing tree. But this was pretty important because in that moment, right, she's sitting there looking at this chasm. It's too big for her to just step over, right? And the other side of it is sloped. So she's gonna have to do it pretty carefully because it'd be very easy for her to get onto the other side, but then just slam down and die anyway, which would not be great. But anyway, so in that moment, she takes off her wedding ring, which she still had on that entire time. Miraculously, I would have chucked that shit a while ago, but I'm a different person. So, and she starts thinking about her father's voice and the queen and Prince Henry and everything that's happened to her. And she takes that ring off and she just drops it. And I feel that was just a very big release. It was her officially cutting ties with this idea that maybe it was a mistake kind of situation. I think she really is okay, no, if I'm going to get out of here, I'm going to have to be the one to do this myself. So she drops the ring And then this was like a very badass moment. This was like one of my favorite moments, even though it
Me
like
too.
wasn't like a huge key thing, but like she just takes a running, flying leap. This is where her like dagger that she somehow miraculously had before, but she takes that thing and she like uses it to claw onto the other side. And I was like, yeah, like I was like, wow, that was so
Inspiring.
yeah, I was like,
Inspiring.
wow, like you go, girl. She's like
Yes.
climbing that because I was like, dang, that takes like so much strength to be able to do something like that.
Oh, yeah. Fourth Wing spoiler, if you haven't read Fourth Wing, which by now you should have, it's very violent on the gauntlet. That's all I could think
Yeah,
of. Like,
yeah, that's
that
so
girl.
true. Oh,
Yes.
yes, she's yeah, like, anyways. So she claws her way up thanks to her dagger, and she makes it onto the other side. And again, remember there was that blue glowing tree thing over there. So she walks over there and she's like examining these little glowing worms, and she ends up taking some of them and puts them in her makeshift like lantern that she made from one of her sleeves, which I thought was pretty smart. I was like, oh
Yeah.
yeah, that's a really good idea. I don't know what they are, but like they provide light. She also notices that there's water on the other side. So she rushes over to try to drink it. It's disgusting because she drinks from like the water that's been stagnant for knows how long.
That really
But then
freaks me out for whatever reason.
don't drink the cave water, But anyways, she looks up though, because she's like, oh, like obviously like this water had to come from somewhere. So she looks up and she notices like this huge icicle formation, I guess. Like I don't know where those came from either, but
Random patch of ice, cave ice.
magic.
Whatever.
It's a fairy tale. And so she starts to try and drink out of there. She's getting some fresh water. All of a sudden, you get the slow burn, and then the dragon appears and just incinerates that ice. And she's like, oh shit. And she runs away, which she barely makes it away again. But now this time, she ends up like in a part of the cave that's marked with a special little note. So now it says, safe here, she cannot reach, from V. And we talked about this earlier, but who it's B, right? So I'll be okay for now. As she's like looking across this area of the cave, she notices old discarded dresses, and there's a wall which has all these names. I don't even know how many names are on there, but it's a lot. Clearly, a lot of people made it that far, but it really sets in like how many girls have been thrown into this cavern.
Yeah.
Which is crazy. Anyways, eventually she's so exhausted, so she just lays down and she falls asleep. And during that time, she's hallucinating about all these girls and just having some like nightmares and stuff. Maybe not nightmares, but just visions, kind of, right?
I think it's fair to say she's just like hallucinating, either stress, exhaustion, dehydration.
Yeah.
Yeah. So during this hallucination is where we meet V, aka Victoria. Elodie sees her and Victoria walks right up to her and she whispers, "It's a lie." And that sort of jolts Elodie out of this hallucinatory state. And so as a viewer, you're immediately like, what's a lie? So my first thought was, the lie is what Queen Isabella, Prince Henry, like the royal family, is telling the girls that have been sacrificed. That's what she's referring to. But as we continue to watch, that is not, in my opinion, that is not what Victoria is talking about. She is talking about the lie that has perpetrated this entire situation that has continued for generations. So we'll cover that a little bit later, but I just thought that was important to note. So Elodie wakes up from her hallucinatory state and she starts panicking because these like glowworms all over her and she's very gross. But then she realizes that they have healed her. I like this. It's one of the only times that you get some real magic in the movie. Obviously, there's a dragon. That's very fantasy-esque. But I do like that there is some element of magic. So Elodie, in this kind of little holding cave, she sees that they have that previous princesses that have been sacrificed before her have carved a map, so to speak, on the wall. And so I feel like Elodie gathers herself and she makes a plan. I'm going to get out of here. And I feel like this is just another moment that really shows like her grit and her determination. And I really like that. So Elodie heads off on her quest for freedom. And she makes it to the Cave of Music, and there's all the like this wall of like razor sharp crystals. So, being the badass that she makes makeshift like gloves for herself and shoes, and she finds a crown on the ground, and on the back it's carved a V. And so I think it's nice that Victoria was trying to help future princesses escape. And at this point, like maybe Victoria's escaped this way. We don't know. So Elodie uses this crown to throw it over crystals and pull herself up. And it's so triumphant. And she can see the sunlight. And you're like, yes, she's going to make it. She's going to get out. While as she's climbing, we see the dragon come into this cave, open its mouth, and Elodie falls. And you're like, no, she's going to fall in the dragon's mouth. She does not. She catches herself and she makes it all the way to the top.
This was like the first moment where I was like, oh, okay, like we're getting close to the end of the movie. Like we're gonna like she's gonna get out. It's gonna be fine. Which I guess I probably would have been satisfied had it ended that way, but that was not the case. So she gets to the top and she sees an opening, and obviously we're like, okay, like very close, like she's gonna make it. And she's super emotional because she's like finally thinking, yes, like this is how I'm gonna escape, until she looks down and realizes that she's not gonna be able to climb down. But while she's up there, she ends up seeing some people on horses that are back there, and they're like making their way toward her, and she starts yelling. She's trying to get their attention because that's her only hope, is like for them to see her up there and know she's in there, right? So she's like frantically calling for them, but they can't hear her. And then all of a sudden, out of freaking nowhere, this part scared the shit out of me because I was not expecting it. I was like, whoa.
Me too.
But then the dragon freaking came out of nowhere and just like launches at her and almost gets her. And she narrowly escapes. But in that moment, she sees a little sign on the wall that says, "Not safe," from Victoria. And then there's a burnt skeleton. It was most likely that was Victoria's skeleton sitting up there. So the dragon does end up telling her 3 were taken and 3 must be given. Again, this referencing what we learn later about the truth of why the dragon is actually so angry. And obviously we're curious because we're like, what are you referring to? But it turns out the men end up being Lord Baylord. So Elodie's father has a little bit of a retribution moment and decides to come back and get his daughter.
So Elodie realizes that what the lie is, that the hatchlings were killed by the ancestral king. And so we get the real unedited version of the flashback scene. So we see the dragon roast all the men, the king's left, he's pleading for his life. He's like, please, I'll give you anything. And the dragon tells him, that is not good enough for you. You're going to feel the pain that I feel. And that is what started the tradition of sacrificing the 3 princesses. So the original king, he has to give up his 3 daughters. But this is one like plot point that always just bothered me, because how can the dragon ensure that every single king and queen has 3 daughters to sacrifice? I don't know, kind of dumb. Just to send reality so that you can enjoy this part. This is what started it all.
All right, so now that we know the big secret, we have Lord Baylord and the rest of his men calling for Elodie. They're trying to locate her and find her and try to rescue her. The dragon swoops in and literally just decimates most of them. Like they're gone, like so fast.
Literally, all I could think is, who the fuck would agree to come down here? It doesn't matter how much gold you offered me. If you know there's a deadly ass dragon, who would be like, yeah, I'll show you around. No. Dumb.
Lord Baylord and the dragon have their final face off, and he puts up a fight. He tries his best, but obviously it doesn't really work. But anyways, this is, I think, not the first time, but we like get a real good like full body look of the dragon. And I know I said you feel like the dragon looks weird, right?
It looks, Lorraine, I can't tell you how many notes I have like in the show notes about this. Like it's like can you like, I don't even have words because it just is so strange to me. I hate the way it looks. Its eyes, something about its face. it's too lizard-like and also serpent. It has like opposable thumbs because there's a couple scenes where it picks up people. I'm like, that is not normal. I don't like it.
That's
That
true.
is the one
That's
thing
true.
I hate it. I hate it.
Something that people were saying though is that they liked about the dragon, like when I was like reading comments and stuff, that they liked that this was like a four-legged dragon. Because they were saying, like, for example, in House of Dragon and stuff, technically they're wyverns where they don't have arms. Like they don't have front arms. Like they only have the back legs
What?
and the wings. But in this
Stop.
dragon has like front legs and back legs and wings.
That is not true.
Yeah, dude, it is. I
If
like literally went and looked it up. We can like insert a little picture, but like I went here
yes,
because I was like,
okay.
are you for real? Like I couldn't
No
remember.
way.
Yeah.
How would I not have noticed that? Oh my God. I have to look this up immediately
So
afterwards
this is
because
like, in their opinion, they're like,
what?
oh, it's like finally like a legitimate dragon and not like a
Fair
wyvern.
enough.
The dragon has the dad pen and then the dragon, I guess, and he dies.
I like the sound of you made for that. That's the sound of someone being killed by a dragon.
Yes. Just bye. Anyways, there's one other guard left, like somewhere off in the distance. And so he starts shuffling around and it distracts the dragon and gives Elodie a little bit of time to escape. Elodie's climbing up the rope during this time, which is also another like heart racing moment because I'm like sitting there, is she gonna make it? I don't know what's gonna happen. But luckily, she does in fact escape. And if I did think that the movie was gonna end with her at the top of the cave, then I certainly thought this was gonna be the end now because she finally gets out.
So in this next scene, we see the queen and the royal family. They're staring at the mountain. The sky is lit up with fire. It is obvious that something has gone awry. The queen is clearly angered by this, and she says, I'm gonna go fix this." So I'm gonna be honest, I had no idea what she meant by that. I was like in the very next scene, it is revealed what her plan is. I was very shocked. Did you see what was coming, Lorraine?
No, I just thought that I just assumed that she was just gonna go try to find Elodie. Is what I was
Yeah,
thinking.
same. In reality, the queen remembers that Elodie has a younger sister, our sweet, adorable Floria. So the queen sees this Floria and presumably takes her to the mountain. Meanwhile, Elodie has been hiding in these rocks like all night long. She has this moment of relief and joy where she thinks that she has escaped. So she begins to make her way down the mountain and runs into stepmother. They have a brief conversation. She's like, "Where's Floria?" And stepmother tells her that the queen took Floria up to the mountain. So Elodie's like, "I'm gonna go get her. I'm gonna save her." Which I just have to say, like, sucks for our girl. Like, you literally made it out. You did the impossible, and now we're right back in there. But Elodie is brave and she's badass and she loves her little sister. So she's gonna go and save her. So then we see we're back on the mountain with the queen and the prince and Floria. And I will say, Prince Henry still sucks, but props to him because even he is like telling his mom she's too young, that this is wrong. Like he basically refuses to participate in any part of this. So props to him for like having some,
He's
moral
got
threshold.
boundaries.
I get, yes, good for him. Good for him. But the queen literally cuts her own hand and mixes it with Floria's blood and just like she's like tossed her in the cavern.
Surprise! Elodie is back in the caves yet again. She has not escaped. She did escape, but she escaped
Back into the
eventually,
fire.
but she's back at it again. So she climbs back down, and we see that the dragon now has Floria. And Elodie is obviously very pissed because it's one thing for her to get taken, but it's a whole different issue for her little sister to be taken. That sister rage. So she goes into battle mode. And at this point, this is like one of the things where like the timeline was a little bit confusing because she just like retraces all of her steps so quickly, which obviously they sped that up. But I was like, how long did it actually take her to get from like where she was dropped to where she is? You know what I mean? But anyway, so she collects all of her battle stuff. She gets the worms. She gets over to the other side and like makes her way all the way back through again. And again, this is another point where we're like, does the dragon just have bad senses because like doesn't notice that she's in there at all, you know?
Yes.
So that's
So
a little
weird.
weird, but anyways, again, it's a movie, so we will ignore that. She's also like collecting a bunch of armor and swords and stuff. And it was a little bit of a moment where you're like, what is she planning on doing with these at first? But it turns out she lays a trap with it. So she sets everything up and she designs it so all that stuff was going to fall and it would distract the dragon, which was pretty smart. Obviously, the trap falls and the dragon hears it and it lures her away. And then Elodie is able to go to Floria. Elodie ends up telling Floria to go hide and that she's going to confront the dragon and tell her the truth.
Which, as we know, as you mentioned earlier, the truth is very important to Elodie. So we have finally arrived at the moment of truth where all is revealed. Elodie is now directly facing the dragon. She is once again showing her bravery and her fearlessness. She's literally holding a sword to the dragon's eye. And the dragon says, "That won't kill me. It will only make me angry." And I love this, one of my favorite parts of the entire movie. Elodie literally says, "Good, I'm angry too." Which, what a badass to just be like, and so what's your point? Because I honestly probably still would have been crying if I would have made it this far. But I just love this because I feel like it's a real character evolution for her. She goes from being scared and angry and hurt to just, you know what, I gotta suck it up so I can survive, to truly being fearless and outraged and justifiably right. Like, she has literally been betrayed. She was tossed into a cavern to be a sacrifice. So I just love this evolution for her. So Elodie, really important here, says we have both been lied to. This precedes a conversation where Elodie reveals the truth to the dragon. She says, "I know what happened to you and your eggs." And we find out that the daughters are the last of the dragon's line. And so that is why the dragon demands a sacrifice of 3 royal princesses, because it's meant to represent her 3 hatchlings that were slain. The dragon does not really initially believe Elodie. She blows fire. Elodie falls down a cliff into some water, which I don't know where this like whole little mini lake pond thing was before, but whatever, it's there. Elodie is badly burned. Floria tries to throw Elodie a sword, but in trying to get to it, she is pinned by the dragon. So this is the moment where I'm like, how is she going to get out of this? There's no way, right? I'm like, oh, she's going to die. That's the end of the movie. Like, maybe Floria will survive. But Elodie stabs the dragon in the eye with a dagger. Elodie and the dragon face off, and Elodie runs her through with the sword and screams, "I'm not one of them." And the dragon picks her up with her claw and says, "I smell it in your blood." Which, again, super important, because how is that possible since Elodie is not actually loyal? It's all back to the blood ceremony in the beginning. At this point, Elodie and the dragon are both weakened, and they just are like, it's like in a sword scene when they're both like really tired and they're like, "Yeah, just give me a minute.
Yeah.
I gotta keep fighting, but just give me a minute." Like, they're both like wounded. They're like, "Hold on." So Elodie noticed that there's like this dust blowing on the ground, which, where did that breeze come from? I'm not going to think about it too hard. I just had to point it out. And she notices there's this part of the cavern that's like curved and that the dust like rebounds off of it. So I did not figure out her plan until it literally happened. I'm not that clever, but Elodie is that clever. So good for Elodie. The dragon tells Elodie that they're both to die alone, and Elodie says, "No, I have an army with me, every innocent woman whose life is stolen down here," which I really love. Like, vengeance for all.
It's like her heroine moment. She's really like,
yeah,
this isn't just about me. This is about like everybody thus far who's had to endure a death sentence because of the situation. Elodie, in her final little trick, baits the dragon into breathing fire, which again is like so brave. I think she literally is like, "Burn me, like, go ahead, do it, like I dare you."
Brave as hell.
Which on one hand you're like, okay, she has a plan, so she's gonna escape, but on the other hand it's like, yeah, I mean, she's willing to die for it. So the dragon does that, but she jumps out of the way at the last minute, and the fire ends up rebounding off of the wall that was there, and it shoots right back at the dragon. And at this point, this is like where it was important to note that the dragon has like that molten fire. But also it's weird because you'd think that the dragon couldn't get burned by its own fire, but it does.
Yeah, I feel like it's
So,
not canon for most dragons. Like most dragons are usually fireproof because it's an occupational hazard. So I thought that was a little weird, but once again, I will distend reality for the sake of the plot.
so now the dragon is sufficiently injured. She's been stabbed, she's blind, she's like limping, she's burned. She's clearly on her way to dying. But Melody approaches the dragon and is like, look at my hand. This is what I was trying to tell you. And Elodie tells her that she's been killing innocent daughters this entire time. And so the dragon, again, dying, weakened, just tells her to end it. And I really thought she was going to do it, to be honest. I was like, oh, okay, she might, she's going to do it. Instead, Elodie slams the sword down, and we think again that she's going to stab the dragon and kill her, but instead she says, I'm through doing what I'm told. She does not stab the dragon, but then she goes and fetches some of the glowworms. So she collects them.
Convenient.
She like puts them on the dragon to heal the dragon, which I just thought that was really nice. I think it was a nice show of like, we're all just done. We're tired of fighting. Like, let's stop fighting and we don't need to hurting each other. So
I think in a way Elodie realizes that the dragon is a victim too.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
The dragon has also been lied to. Also, the dragon's babies were literally murdered. So in a way, she's almost just as much as a victim of the kingdom of Oria as all the poor innocent girls that were sacrificed to them.
Yeah.
So we see the sword stabbed down back to the kingdom of Oria, where yet another wedding of Prince Henry is taking place. I will also give him a little credit. Even he looks tired of this. Like, he looks haggard and he's like, not this shit again.
Yeah.
But he's still doing it. So can't give him too much credit.
Yeah.
And then you see a gold coin roll out onto the path. And it is the same gold coin that Elodie was given at the very beginning of the movie and the initial blood sharing scene.
Yeah.
And I actually, very proud of myself here, I did pause it and I looked at the words on the coin, and it's Latin. I could try and read it. I'll probably embarrass myself, but using Google Translate, it translates to, for the blood of life is the fire of life. So just a little, yeah, I know, right?
Wow, look at you, little investigator.
I know. It's possible that I got the order of the words wrong because it's like circular, so I wasn't sure which word was the beginning, which one was the end. So I did the best I could. So if there's any Latin experts out there, help us. Anyway, Elodie comes out looking all badass. Henry is a loser. And if he's like, Puffy, I haven't slept a moment. Like, be quiet, Henry, be quiet. No. Even still in this moment, though, the queen tells Henry, you don't need to explain yourself to a commoner. Like, after all of this, the queen still feels like this deep sense of like entitlement and superiority, which is just unbelievable. Elodie goes up on the kind of little raised platform, and she's like, is she meant to be this third sacrifice? And Henry is such a cliche man in this scene. He starts saying like, Elodie, after this one, I'll be free to marry whomever I wish. Yes, that's exactly what is on our mind right now. Yes, I would love to marry you, who literally sacrificed me to a dragon. That is just, it's so cringe. It's so cringe.
Ew.
Even in this moment, the queen continues to insult Elodie and justify her actions. And then Elodie drops like the best one line. She's like, this is the end of your story. Cue the dragon. The dragon burns them all. Prince Henry, he kind of looks up. He just accepts it. He closes his eyes. He embraces the fire. But I love, this is kind of one of my favorite parts. The very last minute, the queen still looks outraged. She's screaming, no, no. And then you see the gold of her crown melting down her face. And all I could think was of in Game of Thrones, when Khal Drogo, Daenerys' brother, Viserys, like, he's super awful. And he puts the melted gold on his head and he's like, here, a golden crown for a king. And I don't know why, but I just thought that was a fun parallel, because those were both horrible people who ended fine. So then we have this badass cutscene of Elodie walking out of this castle as it burns to the ground, very Michael Bay-esque. And then we flash forward a little bit. Everybody's alive, and we see Elodie talking with her stepmother, and they're talking about their plans for the future. And we get the sense of everything's going to work out. Everything's going to be okay. They show them on the ship. They're going home with the dragon in tow, which, okay, the dragon's going to go with, I don't know. I thought that last little part was weird. What is the dragon supposed to do? I don't know. But yeah. And the end, they all lived happily ever after.
Happily ever after. Dang, that was like truly the amount of twists and turns that just like is like, oh, like you just keep getting tugged along. You're like, oh, it's almost done. And they're like, no. And then they do that like 5 times over. So like by the time you get to the end, you're like, wow, like
it really pulls you in. It really does. Okay, so favorite moments. Lorraine, what were your favorite moments?
My favorite moments, I really liked when I said this before, but like when she leaped across the little chasm thing and she just stabs the earth with her.
I thought that was one of my favorites too.
I was like, oh, you're so like resourceful. And I don't know, it was just like a very like badass moment to just leap across like that.
Yeah.
My other favorite thing, those little worms. Those things came in so clutch. And I was like, you guys are like the unsung heroes for saving all the skin and healing them all from their wounds.
Yeah.
And they're so magical. But I actually thought that like her scaling the diamond cave thing.
The crystal cave, yeah.
Yeah, like that was just cool. Because obviously that could have been so dangerous. All it took was her landing on the spike and just like being like speared. Yeah. So for her to just be able to climb out through those and use the crown too, I thought that was really smart too. One of my other favorite scenes when Elodie and the dragon confront the queen at the end and just like burn her to the ground. It was just such an epic moment because it was so satisfying to just see her get burned. I loved it.
It really was satisfying.
And then I guess my final one was just when she tells the dragon burn me, like knowing that she had that whole plan for the fire to turn around and end up shooting the dragon and stuff. What were your favorite moments?
I had a lot of similar ones, so I won't necessarily repeat them, but I said this earlier in the episode, but I still thought it was so hilarious when he's like, I have to carry you across the bridge. And she just jumps right into his arms and it's just closes her eyes. And then he just like tosses her into the cave. I don't know why. I just thought that was so funny. And then one of my favorite quotes from the movie is actually the very opening one. Is you hear like a voiceover of Elodie, and she says, there are many stories of chivalry where the heroic knight saves a damsel in distress. This is not one of them.
Oh,
and I love that. Yeah, it's just it's badass. Like, it's nice we don't always need a man to save us. Is there anything major that you disliked about the movie?
One thing I realized is that like the whole premise of all this started because of a stupid man making stupid man decisions.
Excellent
point. Everybody that was fighting was like all the women. Like the dragon was female, the queen, and then Elodie. And I was like, y'all have this all wrong. Like you're fighting with each other, but like you didn't even start this. It was like the freaking king.
It's even your dad's fault, like Lord Bayford. Yeah. And then who suffers the consequences? Elodie, stepmother, Floria.
Yeah, like it's like the men doing stupid shit and then the women having
cleaning
to like
up after them.
Like fix it or having conflict with themselves because of it. Was there anything that you disliked about it?
Yeah, my main two things, pretty simple. There were some like minor plot holes, but I just didn't think too hard about it. And I just went about my merry way. And I hated the way the dragon looked. It just bugged me. It just looked weird. It just looked weird.
It didn't look very like there was like too many.
It was something
spikes and stuff like happening. And I was like, yeah, it really does look a little bit more like a lizard. So
lizard vibes.
Yeah. So rating and recommendation. I'll be honest and say that I mean I am like 99% sure that this is a terrible score on Rotten Tomatoes.
Oh, it has to be, right?
I think it's gonna be so bad, like so bad. But with that being said, I I thought it was pretty good overall. Like, it was entertaining.
Same.
As long as you don't think too hard about like, yeah, like the structure or some of the stuff going on in the plot, then it was a good movie, in my opinion. Would I watch it again? No. Like, I think I feel pretty good about like watching it twice that I did for us to make this podcast on it today.
Yeah.
But like, aside from that, I'm like, oh, okay, like it's, good to watch once, but it wouldn't become like a favorite repeat movie or anything. So
Yeah. I mean, is it a cinematic masterpiece? Absolutely not.
no.
Is it entertaining? Yeah. So I think it's worth a watch. Okay,
Yeah.
so let's do Rotten Tomatoes first. What would you say the critic score is and the audience score if you had to guess?
Oh, critic score. I would give it, I honestly probably is like 40%.
Okay.
Like from a critic's perspective.
I gave it a 47 from a critic's perspective. Now, what would you give it for an audience score?
I think the audience would be a little bit higher. I was gonna say maybe like 60%.
Oof. I said 54. 60 seems too high. 60 seems too
I
high.
mean, 6 out of 10 is like a D. So
Okay. So my sweet husband, he wrote it down for me because I, didn't look because I wanted us to guess.
yeah.
So let's see. Let's see. So the critic score was 56%.
Oh, okay.
I'm a little surprised. Okay.
Yeah, same. I am too.
Oh, Lorraine, you were right. The audience score is 64%. Yeah. Okay. And what do you think? Oh, Lorraine, you were right. The audience score is 64%.
Probably similar, like 55%.
So like you mean like 5.5?
5.5 out of 10. Yeah, 5.5.
Okay. I said 5.2. So let's see. 6.1.
Oh,
Okay.
wow.
So
Okay.
6 out of 10 people think you should watch it, including us. So watch it.
Yeah. Yeah. That was pretty good.
Yeah, not bad. All right. Take us home, Lorraine.
Oh, well, thank you guys so much for tuning in for our very first official episode of the Booked on Fantasy podcast. We are truly so glad if you guys listened to all of this. Thank you so much for being here with us and like listening to our thoughts. We obviously appreciate everyone that tunes in and listens to us. And feel free to like it, share it, leave comments, leave a review, like anything that you think. We'll definitely go and read all of those. On our next episode, we're going to begin coverage of the Throne of Glass series with Sarah J. Maas. So definitely stay tuned for that. And all of our social medias, we will link them down below in the comments. So
thanks, guys.
All right, bye. This is episode 2 of the Booked on Fantasy Pack.
Blah, 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 blah. Okay.